So we've received instructions for a surveillance job. Now, the first thing that we do when we receive instructions for a surveillance job is we look at our correspondence with the client and make sure we have everything that we need. So in investigations, we're by definition dealing with the unknown. So we are going to go into the field, and without qualification, we're always going to encounter something that we didn't expect. That's just the nature of the work. So the best way to be prepared to deal with the unexpected is to make sure you've got everything in place that you can plan and prepare for before you go into the field. So it might seem a little bit tedious, or it might seem to the client to be a little bit long and open-ended in terms of the correspondence that we engage in, but we want to make sure that we're going to get the best possible outcome for them. And in order to do that, we need to correspond and make sure we've got every available detail from them about the person or the entity or the situation or the location that we're going to investigate. So firstly, we will inspect what we've got and make sure everything is in place. We'll make sure our contract is clear about when we're going to do surveillance, where we're going to do it, how long we're going to do it for, how many investigators we're going to use, what variables we need to be prepared for, and so on. Once that's all taken care of, we'll then move to the next stage, which is to instruct a surveillance investigator or surveillance investigators. Sometimes surveillance jobs only involve engaging one surveillance investigator, whereas we've done jobs previously where 7 or 8 investigators have been engaged at the same time following one subject. And that depends, the number of investigators that we use, it depends on the logistics of the investigation. And that's something that we discuss with the client of the investigation before the investigation contract is formulated, because we want to make sure we're not going to do the job half. So the analogy that I use is, let's say you're moving house and you have a piano. It's pointless hiring one removalist because you won't be able to move the piano. It's a much better investment to hire 2 or 3 or a specialist removalist. And it's similar for investigations. There are some jobs that simply can't be done by one investigator, so we need to use multiple investigators. Now, the process of instructing surveillance investigators is something that it's seemingly straightforward because you've got all the information there in your correspondence with the client. But again, you need to adopt a careful and logical thought process in order to properly plan and prepare the investigators who are actually going to be working on the job. So the first thing you have to do is you have to ensure that you are preparing any investigators for anything that might eventuate, which is an impossibility because you could turn up to a job and come upon a crime scene or something like that, or you could turn up to a job and the house is been demolished that you were going to watch. There's any one of innumerable possibilities. So what you have to try to do is put the field operatives in the best place to be able to be prepared for the unknown. Now, we used to get surveillance instructions from law firms or insurers, and that would be to conduct an investigation into a worker who states that they're allegedly injured and is off work. And usually by the time an investigation comes to us, they have a reason for conducting the investigation. So there's a suspicion that the injured worker is not, in fact, as injured as they claim. So in those circumstances, they would, lawyers and insurers often ask investigators to conduct investigations of subject persons at medical appointments. And the reason they do that is because the person might make claims at the medical appointment about their capabilities. They might say, oh, I can only walk for 5 minutes at a time. If they then leave the medical appointment and we see them walking for half an hour with no hindrance, then it's going to be evidence that their claims are contrary to what we actually observed. Now, the problem with the instructions that an investigator might get from an insurer or a law firm is, let's say the medical appointment starts at 9 a.m. in the morning. Well, the instructions would often say, start at 9 a.m. Well, that doesn't make sense because you want to start before there's any activity of potential interest. And that applies to any surveillance job, regardless of who you're watching or where you're watching them. you want to commence in advance of any activity of potential interest, because you might not, it might be difficult to identify the subject, for example. So if you turn up to a medical appointment and the subject has already arrived and is in the medical appointment, you might have trouble identifying them when they come out. They might be wearing a mask, they might be just difficult to identify amongst other persons who are a similar age, similar ethnicity at the same location. So you want to see them come in, and that way you can identify them. It's the same principle if you're doing any type of investigation. You want to go broader and wider and allow for the problems or the biases or the mistakes that might occur in the course of the surveillance investigation. So start as early as you can. You might not have parking wherever you want to go, and just keep those kind of things in mind. Keep the logistics of the investigation in mind. So when you issue the instructions, one of the most important things that I impress upon investigators is that you have the most remarkable tool available to you in Google Maps, which didn't exist until 20 odd years ago. So we now have Google Maps and Street View, where you can instantaneously observe almost any location and almost any street view location, and you can check the logistics in the location at which you intend to conduct surveillance. Is there parking on the street? Is there a clear line of sight from the parking to the address of interest? At the address of interest, how many entry and exit points are there? Is it likely to be busy at that time? Are we likely to be able to get a park, or do we need to get there earlier? Is it an area where few people park on the street and we're going to stand out? A lot of new developments, especially in certain types of areas, have limited street parking, and that's because these suburbs are almost designed just to be self-contained, and any visitors might just park in the front yards of the residences in that location, because the front yards or the driveways are large, and streets might not even be designed for parking. So that can introduce logistical challenges that an investigator has to consider. We did a job once at a high-rise apartment block in the middle of a CBD, an Australian CBD, and we became aware over the course of the investigation that there were something like 7 entry exit points from this building, and almost each one needed a separate investigator to monitor it carefully. So these are the kind of things that you need to endeavour to look at before issuing a surveillance job. But it's not just logistics, it's also the conceptualization of what it is that you have to do. So you need to consider, is the information that you have going to enable you to conduct the investigation in a standard way, or do you need to try to supplement the field investigator's work by doing some database searches yourself to try to give the investigator more information? For example, if you don't have a photograph of the subject person that you're investigating, can you obtain one easily online? Well, if you can, you should do that so that they're prepared, because they may not have the time to do that in the field. They might turn up to the job and there's activity straight away, or they're looking for a park. So as a investigation manager, you have to do the best to put the field investigators in a position where they're able just to do what they need to do and identify and follow the subject. So any preparation that can go into a job should go into a job, so that investigators are properly prepared. The easiest way to prepare surveillance investigators for a job is to look at instructions and work on the basis that everything you are told could be mistaken. So clients make mistakes in instructing investigators. They might miss information that might be relevant. They might make spelling errors, or they might attach the wrong file. So all of these things, any single data point always needs to be considered that single data point might be a mistake. So you need to double check where possible. You need to consider the information you're getting in the context of the broader investigation and all the broader information that you've got and any information you've uncovered. And then that goes into the matrix, the investigation. You consider it as a whole. As Bruce Lee used to say when he was learning how to fight, he learned all the forms for fighting, and then when he fought, he forgot it and he just acted on instinct. You also need to adequately prepare for the conduct of the investigation. So once you've got the information from the client issued the job properly to the investigator, allowing for all the unknowns, you then need to consider during the investigation and after the investigation what is going to happen, who needs to be updated. If there's a problem or there's something that needs to be clarified in the course of the investigation, who is going to be contactable at that time? Will the client be able to be contacted, or will they be busy? Do they want to be contacted? Maybe they don't, depending on their relationship with the subject and what they're up to at that time. Who is going to manage it, and if that person is unavailable, is there a backup person to speak to? There always needs to be someone to manage an investigation, because the investigators in the field might need some kind of assistance. They might need some kind of searches conducted. They might need some kind of database information. Whatever it is, they might need some assistance, and they can't necessarily do what they need to do while they're driving a vehicle or following a subject on foot. And so you need to supplement them and be their brain or their abstract thought process while they're engaged and busy on the job. So I think the most important principles in surveillance are also principles that are applicable for other types of investigative work that we do. And that is that you need to try to remove your subjectivity. You need to make sure all the data is available, all the data is provided to the surveillance operatives. You've considered it from every angle possible to make sure that the data is accurate. And if it's not accurate, then you're prepared for that, and the operatives are prepared for that. And then in the course of the investigation, you need to be aware of things that might occur that you might not expect. You also need to double check anything that if you form an opinion during a job, you need to try to be in a position to confirm that opinion with objective evidence where possible. So for example, if you're not certain whether the person you're watching is the subject, then if you can send a photograph to the client who is able to identify them, or perhaps the client knows someone who can identify them if it's a company or a law firm or an insurer. And so that enables you to while you're on the job, confirm that you're on the right track. So it can become a dynamic process, and you don't always have that opportunity, but when you have the opportunity to confirm something, then you should always do that. You should make sure that you strengthen your case at every point in time, and you work on the basis that any single data point might be fallible and might be wrong, including an opinion you form, because that could be the result of bias. So wherever possible, check, double check, and check with any source that is going to be able to assist you. Always make sure a job is issued. So if you're issuing a job, they need to confirm it. That's just basic administration. Make sure that everyone understands and has the job and knows what to do, and that it will be provided, updates will be provided as required, and or anything else that needs to occur during the course of the investigation will be taken care of. That's instructing a surveillance investigator or investigators for the purposes of our conversation today. If you can prepare for the unknown, then you're going to be in a good position to be able to prepare other people for the unknown, and anything can happen at any time. So always be prepared.